Welcome to Go Let Yourself, a podcast about streaming on the internet. I am Cherry Cake.
And I am Crunky.
And I am Sunny D.
We aim to bring you regular interviews with your favorite streamer to find out more about the person behind the webcam.
To give you more of an inside look into how they got started, what their goals are, and what keeps them coming back to stream.
Today we're going to take a break from our normal interviews and do a retrospective discussion about the Legend of Zelda series. I know Cherry and Dee have been playing this game a lot lately, and I figured now would be a good time to kind of open up the can of worms that is talking about the Legend of Zelda, what it means to the three of us, and hopefully share some stories and some insights into our gameplay. Thanks for joining us, Dee.
Well, thank you for having me back.
Obviously, anytime you are. I guess we could get started by discussing Breath of the Wild for a little bit. We talked about it, I believe, on the stream that Cherry and I did together. We talked a little bit about it when it was new, but here we are, almost a year later after its release, and you guys are really getting your teeth into it. I played it quite a bit when it launched, but I haven't played it in a while. I still remember it fondly, but how have you been experiencing it, Dee?
Oh, I love it. I was playing the Tomb Raider series. I got through that quicker than I thought I would.
Well, the Tomb Raider series, you mean the two newer ones, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. There's just a lot of those games.
That's true. The two newest ones.
Oh, okay, cool.
Which I had a lot of fun with, and I had problems after that. I couldn't find anything I really wanted to play. So I started looking up games that people suggested to play afterwards, and Breath of the Wild actually came up. They said even though it's more open world, you still get that kind of feel with the exploration and the puzzles. I think the puzzles was the big thing. So I've just been really just loving that. Actually, I get so distracted by wanting to go do shrines, I forget about quests.
Yeah, that's the ADD game from hell, because I remember when I played it, the worst thing you could do is set out to do something on stream. Today I'm going to get this done and this done and this done, and then you play Breath of the Wild for 6 hours. You're like, I didn't do any of those things. Yeah. Oh man. So you've really been getting into it. How far into the game are you?
I am probably not as far as I should be. Just because, as I said, you do get distracted. You get to the shrines. I have, there are 4 divine beasts. I have just gone through one of them, and that's it.
Oh, okay.
But just the whole exploration and even just cooking, learning how to cook distracts you.
Yeah, I've lost a lot of time to cooking.
Yeah, it takes a while because you have to stock up on some of that stuff.
Yeah, but you're always finding like new stuff as well, because when you're out and about in the world itself, if you haven't discovered something, it will come up as a question mark. So once you discover it, it will tell you the name of the thing. So if you go and find something that's got a question mark on it, you're like, I wonder what I can do with that. And then in your menu, it gives you a little blurb of like, you found this thing, it can be used for blah, 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 X, Y, and Z. And then you go and cook with it, and then you discover new things, and then you can mix it with other things and discover more things. So it's like an infinite list of stuff that you can cook.
Yeah, I was reading this article on IGN maybe a week ago in preparation for this, and they had this list of like 100 facts you didn't know about, or probably didn't know about Breath of the Wild, and I was like, well, sure, I played the game for hundreds of hours. I probably no, I didn't, like maybe 25% of them. Like you could throw a rusty weapon at an Octorok, and it will eat it, clean it out, and spit it back out as a brand new weapon.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it'll be upgraded.
Oh, man.
See, you guys think you know it all. Just like I did. You can survive in cold environments without elixirs or warm clothes just by equipping a fire rod or a torch. That'll keep you warm.
That would have been useful to know.
Exactly.
I was just like taking hits and just like scoffing all this food without, because it was really early on in the game where you have to like ascend a peak that's like cold weather, and obviously when it's at the beginning you don't have any equipment or learn how to cook or anything like that, and there was me just like suffering through it, just eating all my food that I had in my inventory.
It's exactly what I did. I know exactly. It's the first time they teach you about elemental damage. Is that there's 3 shrines I think on the newbie island, and one of them is in the cold, and you have to like brave it. And you just chuck down all your food. Then you get to the boss. You're like, wait a minute, or the shrine. I don't have anything to keep myself.
Oh yeah, like last night, I had to carry this blue flame around with me for a side quest, and all of a sudden it started raining, and my flame went out, and I was like, what happened?
No.
And then I was like, oh, it's raining, and then it did it to me again.
Man, the next one on this list is the temperature in the desert is lower in the shade than it is the sun. So if you're taking damage out in the desert from heat, you can go in the shade and you'll take slightly less damage.
Man, it's so clever. So I was playing it on stream the other day, and I think it was Snuffers that was talking to me about it, and I was explaining, he was wondering what the little icons were in the bottom right, where you know where the temperature is and the sound is.
Yeah.
And I was explaining to him what the temperature one was, and as it's like the first Zelda that's kind of done that kind of thing. I didn't know it was that in depth that you could, like you just told me then, like if you go into the desert, if you hide in the shade, it will lower the heat. It's very clever for what it does.
It's amazing. I was continuously surprised the entire time that I played it by things that would happen. Like one of the things I figured out on my own was if you feed the dogs outside the towns, they'll take you and show you a hidden treasure, and that's that little Nintendo, reward that they put in all their games that you would. Not every developer does something like that, where there's just little things. I know everyone talks about you can't pet those dogs. Everyone wants to pet them and you can't, and I get it, but if you feed them food, they will. If you guys, I think, feed them 2 apples, they'll bark and they'll run off. And if you follow them, they'll take you to a treasure nearby.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
I knew you could feed them, but I didn't know they took you to treasure.
Yeah, I think it's 2 or 3. Don't quote me on that because it's been a while since I've done it, but 2 or 3 times. Yeah, it's pretty. Also, if you leave Link without a shirt on for very long and leave him idle, he'll do a custom flexing animation while he's idle. So next time you're on the stream, you got to do that just to see him flex.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh man. But yeah, Cherry, did you finish that one?
Which one?
Breath of the Wild?
No, I haven't finished it yet. I managed to do 2 shrines.
Yeah.
Sorry, not 2 shrines. 2 divine beasts. But like
Which
Dee
for those who haven't played it, those are basically the dungeons of the game. These giant walking beasts, machine beasts. Sorry, go ahead.
Like Dee was saying, it's too easy to get distracted. So I kind of now spend my time just searching for shrines all over, and it's very addictive doing that. But there is one divine beast that I haven't actually found. I know there's one. I know of one. I won't spoil it too much, but there is one that I need to go and do. But the 4th one I haven't actually found yet.
I think we're okay to talk spoilers. It's been almost a year, so I'm not worried about. If you guys are worried about spoilers, pause this podcast now or skip ahead about 10 minutes.
Go and play it first, and then come back.
Exactly, but I think the window's passed on us worrying about it. It's one of the benefits of us playing it sporadically, like we've done, and later in the life cycle. Because you started on the Wii U, if I remember right, Sherry.
I did, yeah, and I had a bit of a bad time with it on the Wii U. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was because it was on the console or I just wasn't like at that point that I wanted to play that kind of game. But I really struggled to get to grips with it and actually want to play it. But ever since I've had it for the Switch, after I finished Mario Odyssey because I couldn't put that game down, I've really, really got into it, and I don't know what the difference was.
So I wonder, did you notice like a frame rate improvement when you played it on the? If I remember right, the Switch's frame rate's a little bit better. It's a little more solid.
Yeah, I think yeah. I did know it. The only downside I can think of at the moment is that on the Switch, I noticed the other day. I don't know if it was because I was streaming it or what, but when I had it on my big TV, I was in the Lost Woods and I noticed a significant frame drop there. It really, really dropped out. But
even on the Switch, it does on that. Yeah.
Maybe it's more. Maybe it's optimized for the Switch rather than the Wii U. But I
Well,
don't know.
I know they developed it for the Wii U, but I think just the raw horsepower on the Switch allows them to, squeeze a little bit more fidelity.
Yeah.
I know it looks just slightly better and it runs a lot more stable, but I guess the one thing that you don't have on the Switch is the little map on the controller, right? That's what doesn't it show the map on the Wii U controller?
Do you know I played it that little? I can't actually remember.
Holy cow!
Yeah.
I'm just looking at this list again. One of the other things, if you disarm like a really tough monster and leave a leaf laying on the ground by him, he'll pick it up and just swing it at you. It can't hurt you with it.
Oh,
That's pretty neat. But yeah, I never actually finished the game. What happened was I played it off and on until and I had everything ready to go fight. Spoiler alert: Ganon's the final boss in this fight or in this game.
What?
I know. Spoiler for almost every Zelda. There are a couple Zelda games where Ganon's not around, but I got all the way to Ganon, and then the DLC came out. I thought, well, I really want to play this challenge, this hardcore mode. And I was actually talking to Chichen this weekend, and he's looking for a game to get into. And I said, there is that challenge mode. He goes, that's a good idea. I think I might play that too. So I'll probably watch him get started and then steal all his good ideas for my stream. But I've been playing too much Monster Hunter right now. So,
what does the challenge mode involve?
I loosely understand that you have less hearts. Everything hits a little harder. That's about all I know for sure. There's probably more things I should know about it, but part of the reason I haven't looked into it much in preparing for this podcast is because I want to go into it blind and experience it without being too well prepared. But there's that. There's that island in the game you can find where they kind of drop you off there naked and you got to gather up everything.
Yeah.
There's a bigger mode of that, I believe, where they put you in these different scenarios where you have to fight your way out like that. And then there's actual story DLC. They're called the Champions Ballad, where I think there's 4 different stories where you go back as the champions from the main storyline. Who is it? Zidon. And I'm drawing a blank on the other one's names. Do you guys remember? You played
Mifa.
Mifa, yeah.
This is bad. We don't remember the name.
Mifa's the only one I ran into, so I don't know about the other ones.
Oh, okay. Well,
I've been trying to keep it not, known too much.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the bird one because he was a bit of a tool to me, so I didn't really want to know him anymore.
And the Goron one too had a funny name. I have the amiibos for all 4 of them. You think I would know these things? But cooking during a blood moon creates critical success on super strong foods.
See, I found out that in Dee's stream the other day because you had a viewer, D, that actually told you that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, my viewers have been really nice about they haven't been spoiling anything for me. They've just been giving me tips.
Nice. Here's one that I thought was amazing. I had no idea. Are you looking for a shrine and can't find it? Look up. The shrines usually have a group of birds circling above them.
Oh.
How insane is that? I found hundreds of shrines. I never knew that.
Oh.
Nice. I'll remember that.
Well, one of the other things that I wanted to talk about here is kind of review Breath of the Wild, discuss a little bit, and just basically gush over it. We all love it, I think, but it definitely wasn't any of our first Zelda games. So let's go around the room. I'm using air quotes. You can't see it, but let's go around the room here and talk about. We'll start with D. What was the first Zelda game that you ever played?
The first Zelda game was actually the first one. The Legend of Zelda was my first one.
Oh.
Wow.
I still have my original NES with the gold cartridge.
Yes, she does. I've played Zelda 1 and 2 on stream when I first started streaming last year, and it was D's NES and D's cartridges that I was using to play it. But so what do you remember? I guess without dating you here, but you had to be you were younger than 10 when you played those, right?
Yeah.
and it was a time when you either had a strategy guide, you had the instruction booklet that came with it, and there was no internet to go Google everything. There was no Google. So how did you make out with that when you played it? Were you able to get to the end and finish that one?
Yes, I actually did.
Wow. I'm impressed.
It took a lot of memory. I actually wrote some stuff down.
Yeah.
Where the different dungeons were.
It's funny now, but that's what you had to do. I remember doing the same thing for like Metroid. I had these like hand drawn, scrawled pieces of paper where this one goes to page 6, this one goes to page 4, because you had to do it.
There was no internet in those days.
No, there wasn't.
No,
back in 1920.
Exactly.
Exactly.
We had to go out and get on a bicycle and pedal it to make electricity out of it.
Well, it was funny because I just remember playing that game and thinking this is something special. Just finding the different little items you could use, like the candlestick, the flames, where you could burn bushes, and sudden you find these like secret staircases, and you're like, "Oh, what is this?" Exactly.
Yeah. That was the very first time they used that sound, and it's epic and iconic with the game now. But are you like me, D? When you got the candle, did you go to every screen on the map and burn every bush trying to find more
yes,
secrets?
I did.
No, you did, because you were like, oh wait, this is the thing. Like there's later dungeons you can only find them by randomly burning bushes and finding a hole in the ground. I mean the way that's why I was surprised, because I played that game like you did, D, when I was younger. I wasn't my first Zelda, but I played it for months before I finished it. I'd get into it, play it, and then I'd go outside and play for a few weeks and come back and play it. And it took forever, not because necessarily it was difficult, but because you just didn't know where to go. It was the first open world game, and that's what, or why when Breath of the Wild came out, if you guys remember there was an early promotional screenshot of it where Link was standing on the edge of a mountain looking out. That might even be the cover. That exact orientation of Link looking out over a mountain is in the instruction book for Zelda 1. And I remember that to this day because I poured through that instruction book for hints. And that's the only way you got any real story from an NES game, is to read the instruction manual. And it really captured again what Zelda had been lacking for 20 years, is that open world aspect. Now, granted, NES 8-bit open world's a lot different thing, but it was revolutionary for its time.
Were you talking about then when Link looking over the world with standing on the mountain? Was that intentional or was that just coincidence?
I think it was intentional. I mean, it's too. I'll have to find and send you the picture of it side by side, but it's clearly, to me, I thought it was intentional. I've not confirmed that anywhere. But hey, do you remember how long it took you to beat Zelda 1?
Oh, it's been I can't remember. That was such a long time. As I said, I was like you. I would have to stop for a while because, for one thing, I did get frustrated trying to map everything out, knowing where everything was. So it took, I don't know, I would say it probably took me a couple months. I would say going back and forth because I was playing Mario 2 also. So
everybody played Mario 2. For those who don't know, Cherry Cake just got done this weekend with a nearly 24-hour stream where she played several Mario games, including Mario. Have you ever played Mario 2 before that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I will say I got to play Mario 1, 2, 3, and a bit of Mario 64. And Mario 2, out of those first 3, was by far the easiest to me to do. I got so stuck on Mario 1 and Mario 3. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, Mario 1 was cracking me up because obviously I'm a bit older than you, but I never had played the Lost Levels versions because I had already played not Lost Levels, the All-Stars version, because by the time All-Stars came out, I had played so much Mario 1, 2, and 3 and World to death that I didn't want to play them anymore.
I was actually watching I managed to catch a speedrun of Mario 1 earlier today, weirdly enough. And
like 2.5 minutes.
Shut up. It took like 20 minutes, all right? It took me about 30 hours. They were playing, it was like a head-to-head, and they were both playing different versions. One was playing the NES version, and one was playing the All-Stars version.
Yeah.
And apparently it's entirely the speedrunner's choice. But the All-Stars version is actually slower than the original NES version, which I thought was quite interesting, I guess.
Yeah, I would guess from an input standpoint, it says it's emulating the NES and it's using different assets. Because part of the reason the NES behaves the way it does you ever seen like the glitchy blocks on the side on an NES, is because
Yeah.
it literally can barely process the sprites that it's got, and to upgrade them to 16-bit would take its toll on an NES. So that's interesting.
They also had the inclusion in the All-Stars version of when you get to a castle, you sometimes get fireworks, which is what I was told wasn't in the actual the original version. So
that's in the original version.
Oh, it is?
It was on, yeah. Now somebody that's listening to this that knows better is probably going to call me out, but I'm pretty sure it's 1, 3, 5, and 7, or 1, 3, 5, and 9. If the timer is counting down ends with 1, 3, 5, or 9, that's how many fireworks you'll get.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Might not be 9, it might be 7. Now I'm sitting here thinking about it, but it's been a minute.
Yeah.
But back to Zelda. Did you ever go through the second quest? For those that don't know, you can actually play after you beat Zelda 1 time. They basically rearrange where all the dungeons are, where all the items are in the world, and you play a second quest. It's a little harder too.
No, I did not. But I'm really the type of gamer, I can't really. It's hard for me to go through a story again.
Yeah.
Or a game again.
I understand. Except for Dark Souls, right?
Except for Dark Souls.
No, I'm joking. Well, what was the first Zelda game you played, Jerry? I believe we might have even talked about this before.
Yeah, I feel like I've mentioned it once or twice. The first one I ever played was Link's Awakening on the original Game Boy, and it wasn't actually mine. It was my sister's that she got, because she's a little bit older than me. So obviously, when that came out, she was at that kind of age. It suited her more. But whenever she wasn't around, I kind of, snuck a little game in here and there.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't know quite why or how I got to Zelda, because I know that we had other games. We actually had what's that Mario game? The one with the coins that you have to get.
The Super Mario Land?
Yes, because we had that one as well.
Oh, okay.
And I remember playing that. That's a story for another time. So
yeah, everything about Mario.
Sorry, I've got Mario on the brain now. Damn you, Odyssey. So yeah, Link's Awakening was the first one that I ever played. And I think at the time, I may have been a bit too young, like I say, because I can't remember when it was actually released.
Yeah.
To play,
get all the adult jokes in it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember playing it. I remember playing it quite a lot, but I never finished it when I first came to it. When I first played it through, and it was only, I think, maybe 2 years ago where I actually I got an emulator online and sat down and actually beat the game for the first time.
Saw the Windfish?
Yeah. I
actually read a lot of research. I read not a retrospective, I think, on that game, how it got made. It was like a pet project of a couple of developers at Nintendo, and that's why it has a bunch of weird stuff snuck into it.
Oh, really?
Like it's got chain chomps in it, and like characters from other games used pretty liberally. And spoiler alert for if you haven't played it, the whole game is a dream, and that's kind of the way that they canonically, can say all that happened.
Yeah, which is why now whenever I'm playing a Mario game, when I see the chain chomps, I call them Bow Wows because it's called it's called Bow Wow in Link's Awakening. Yeah.
Well, here's a funny thing that Dee probably doesn't know. Did you recognize Wart at the end of Mario 2 when you played it the other day? He's in Link's Awakening.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. He gives you a song to play on your ocarina, doesn't he?
But they call him something else. They call him his Japanese name, I think, in Link's Awakening.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I do remember him. Is it?
But I think that's pretty funny. A little nod that the character that's from a dream in Mario 2 is also in a dream in Link's Awakening.
Yeah. There is also a different ending to Link's Awakening as well that you can get.
Really?
Yeah. Which is going to annoy me because I've just forgotten what happens. But you know how I think there's an ending shot after, or maybe before Link wakes up. He's on like the beach and he's sat on a log or something, and he sat by himself. Oh, my memory is so hazy now. I can't actually remember what happens. But anyway,
he sat. Sleep deprivation's probably not helping either, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, he sat by himself, and basically in the alternate version, he sits with the girl. And I can't remember the girl's name, which isn't actually funny, Zelda.
A couple of months ago, I played Eco, that game Eco from PS2 era that I'd always wanted to play, but never really rounded up a PS2 and tried it. So I played it. Was re-released, and it ends very similar to that. You wake up on an island, and he's by himself. You think the girl died, and then all of a sudden there she is, and they're laying on the beach there at the end, and that's the end of the game. So that's kind of weird.
One thing that just reminded me of past days when you guys were talking about there's no internet or anything.
Yeah.
When my sister started playing it, she got to the end of the game where you try and where you're fighting against whatever, like what's taken hold of the windfish, and it takes on different forms and stuff, and she couldn't beat it. And obviously because this was like the late 1980s, early 1990s, the internet wasn't around, or it wasn't as developed as much. So she got so stuck, she ended up calling the Nintendo hotline to get some advice and get hints and tips. And I thought it was so funny. Yeah. I know.
That's what we had to do back in the day. You had to call them up and say, "Hey, help me! I'm stupid. Can't figure this out." Yeah. I don't think I ever called it because I think you have to pay, don't you?
Oh yeah, you did, yeah.
Yeah, it was like in the States they call them 1-900 numbers, and if I called one of them numbers, I'd be like, "No, I swear it's for video games." My mom would be like, "Yeah, right."
Yeah, it was like a pound a minute or something. So what about you then, Crunk? What was your first instance with Zelda? Oh, Link.
Again, I think I may have talked about this before, but just to round out the table here, my first one was Zelda 2. My first NES I bought. I was kind of late to the party. I had played Zelda 1 over a friend's house, but that's not a game you could play, with other people, or being at a friend's house and go, "Can I play this game for 7 hours while you watch?" So when I finally got my own NES, it came with Zelda 2. And I think in retrospect, I'm lucky in that regard because I had no previous expectation to bring with me to what Zelda game was supposed to be. And I was able to enjoy it for its own merits. And I still love that game to this day. And this is blasphemy to true Zelda fans, but I like it better than Zelda 1. What? Only because I played Zelda. I finished and completed Zelda 1 on my own afterwards. Like maybe months after Zelda. I think I borrowed it from a friend of mine who'd already beat the game, Zelda 1, and finished it. But Zelda 2, it's just so much more of a action game than the rest of them. It's kind of more like Breath of the Wild in that, although it's 2D, that your skill can play into how easy and how hard the game is. And I guess that's the same for all of them, but because it's on a 2D table, or 2D, most of the actions on a 2D side-scrolling perspective, you can really build up your skills. You learn spells, you learn attack types, sort of like in, you can learn new moves in some of the later 3D Zeldas, but you learn the up thrust and the down thrust, and you learn how to use spells, how to deflect, how to give yourself higher jump. It's very limited by the tech at the time. It was on the NES, so basically anytime it reloaded an area, all of the spells you'd cast are gone. So you had to manage your magic meter that way. But wow. It's a fantastic game. I played through it recently and still enjoy it. I mean, it's hard to recapture the magic if you've played all the other Zeldas, because it's so much different than the rest. But it did something that I don't think any of the other Zeldas have ever really matched for me, except for maybe Ocarina, in that you have like an overworld. It's like a Final Fantasy game where you have an overworld and there'll be monsters that pop up, and if you run into them, it takes you to a 2D side-scrolling action stage where you have to fight your way out of it to go back to the main world, sort of like Final Fantasy would be, where you'd run around the overworld and then get sucked into an encounter. Then you would go to towns, they would have, instead of calling them castles, they were temples in Zelda 2. And the whole story was, I have to look at the timeline to figure it out, but basically Zelda was asleep, and the Phantom, there was the Phantom of Ganon was trying to bring himself back to life through this enemy called the Thunderbird. And the Thunderbird's the second to last enemy, and then you fight Shadow Link at the very end of the game. Or I might have that backwards.
So Thunderbird in our country means something completely different.
What does it mean in the UK?
I've never heard of the Thunderbird.
Were they like a kids show?
They were like they were essentially puppets. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, it's ringing a bell, but I've never seen them. But that was his name. I didn't name him. They didn't know it.
It's just funny.
Probably more like the localization team did, but that. So speaking of the timeline, I thought it might be interesting to discuss through the actual. I have here in my hands the Hyrule Historia, which is Dee got me for my birthday or Christmas a couple of years ago, and it's this big epic. We both looked at it, and Molly and I have looked at it. It's this great big book about Skyward Sword, mostly. Like half of it's about that, and the rest of it's about the history of Zelda. And in it, they lay out the Nintendo approved approved history chronology of Hyrule. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of talk through it together.
When was this released, Grant?
I want to say it was 2011. Does that sound about right, Dee?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was 2011 because I got it for you for Christmas.
Yeah, it did come out, and I've had it for a while. In fact, it's been since we lived here. So yeah, we moved to the house we live in now in 2009. So yeah, it was right after that. But basically, I think the reason that they released the Hyrule Historia at that time is because Skyward Sword is the first game in the timeline. It basically has the creation of the world. Like if you played Ocarina of Time, there's this big cutscene that they have the creation of the world. What do they call those things? The three yes,
they're part of the Triforce thing, aren't they?
Exactly.
Oh no.
They're basically the three gods. They call them gods, but so basically the legend of the goddesses and the hero. The creation of land and sky happens. Then the Skyward Sword game is called the era of the goddess Hylia. There's a goddess named Hylia. There's an ancient battle and the reincarnation of that goddess, and she returns to the surface. Then there's the Sky era, which have you played Skyward Sword? Dee, did you ever play that, or we watched it, didn't we?
No, I watched you play it.
Yeah.
It's got one of the creepiest villains I've ever seen. But
really?
Yeah,
I haven't played this, so I need education.
Oh, you haven't?
No, I've never played Skyward Sword now.
Oh man, what is his name? I'm looking him up real quick.
What console was it for?
Zant was from. It was for the Wii. Oh. Zant was the one that was from the game before this one, right, Dee?
Yeah, it wasn't Zant. It was the. Oh, I can't remember. He was very creepy though because he had the tongue thing he would do. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. He was a real creep. He had like a real snake tongue and a weird face. He would lick his mouth while he talked, and he was like, Japanese is they're real. Their games I've noticed have androgynous characters quite often, and he's very much that. Carries himself in a very feminine way, and is just I don't know. It's hard not to be controversial to say this, but a little bit unnatural feeling, in the way he carries himself.
Is this like one of the main bosses you're talking about?
Yeah, he's the villain in that game. Well, he's the one you spend most of your time fighting against.
Is he called Demise or
no?
Girahim.
Yeah.
That's it.
Girahim. Yeah. Girahim is his name. Demise is like the evil entity that becomes Ganon eventually, the Dark Force. There's a counterbalance to Lady Hylia or the goddess Hylia, and he's this big like mouth gaping ball, and then he becomes infused with Ganon, I believe.
Ooh.
It's been a long time since I played it, but it's a really good game. It gets, I believe, in many ways, Breath of the Wild's a direct answer to that game because it got really heavy-handed in hand-holdy. It would the intro to everything was really long, and instead of having Navi, the fairy who'd come out and talk to you, that your sword was named Fee, and the spirit of your sword would come out and talk to you just every 5 minutes. You're like, I get it. I hit the monsters. Okay. And it was all that. It's like they took the annoyingness of Navi yelling at you every 5 minutes and the unskippable dialogue from the bird from Ocarina of Time and said, let's make one character do all of that all the time. And it wears you down. And it's got forced motion control, which isn't for everybody. Some people hate motion control. I don't hate it, but even I got tired of using it. It literally would hurt my wrist for playing it for too much.
Ooh.
And it's the only mainline Zelda game I've never finished.
No way, really?
We got... Dee was watching. We got about halfway through it, and I was so frustrated. I'm like, you know what? And I just pulled up YouTube. We watched the end of it. We watched all the cutscenes and watched the end of it. And, you know, I had already bought the game, so who cares, right?
Yeah.
But so at the end of that era, they basically the sacred realm is sealed away. The sky, the city in the clouds is sealed away, and that's called the era of chaos. And then they established the Hyrule Kingdom after that, because it's not Hyrule in the original. It's Hylia. And the cloud in the sky. And then that's when a bunch of games I've never played, the Minish Cap takes place. And then the direct sequel to the Minish Cap is the Four Swords. Have you played those two?
I've seen them. I was watching, I think I told you about it a few weeks or days ago. Another streamer called Smokeloak was doing a Zelda marathon where he played from the entire Zelda collection from 1 to... I think he was doing it up until the release of Breath of the Wild, and I watched him play the Minish Cap, and I saw parts of the Four Swords. I have seen them, but I've never played them.
Yeah, I think I played on Virtual Console maybe a couple of hours of Minish Cap before I just kind of got bored of it. The mobile ones I never, or not mobile, but you know, the handheld ones I never really played a whole lot. So I missed out on Minish Cap, Four Swords. That led to the end of the hero, or the era of the Hero of Time after the Hyrulean Civil War, which is the Ocarina of Time, which I think everyone here has played that, right?
Yeah, many a time.
Dee, did you ever play it, or did you just watch it?
I just watched you play it, but I loved it because I sat there the whole time while you played it.
We need to get Dee to play it.
Yeah, on stream too, after she's done with the one with Breath of the Wild.
I could do that.
I think you'd enjoy it, Dee. I think you would.
The hardest part about playing Ocarina of Time these days is looking at an N64 era graphics.
Yeah.
The 3DS has a really nice upgraded version of it, but it's real hard to stream 3DS unless you have a real expensive capture card hooked to it. But yeah, I mean, I loved Ocarina of Time. I played it when it was new, and I had the gold cartridge with all the real blood colors and the demonic music in the one temple. I've probably mentioned it before, but Ocarina of Time is the game that brought me back into gaming. It was a different era in the 80s and late 80s, early 90s. I was right out of high school. Dee and I had just got our first apartment, and the N64 came out. And in the late 80s, video games were a thing that kids do. Like teenagers were like too cool for it. And that's changed a lot. I mean, it's more socially acceptable now for adults to game well into their later 70s like I do. But the Ocarina of Time, when I first played it, I at that point I had played Zelda 1, 2, and then Link to the Past. And it was this weird combination because I had kind of forgotten about video games. I haven't played games for several years at that point, which when you're, 20 years old, that's a long time, right? And when I got that game, it was so much more immersive. I was immersed in the 2D games when I was younger, but it's a lot easier. You have a better imagination then. But the 3D version of all the things that I remembered, a bunch of the critters, animals and bosses and things, versions of those bosses come back for Ocarina of Time, but it's in 3D. And man, I blame Ocarina of Time for the thousands upon thousands of hours I've wasted of my adult life playing video games still, because that game sucked me in, and I've been looking for a game like that ever since. Did you play it early on too, Cherry?
Yeah, I guess. When did you say it was released?
98, I'm pretty sure. Either late 97 or early 98.
I do remember playing it because we had an N64. I think I mentioned this before, but like the N64 is probably my favorite console I've ever played on, and the Ocarina of Time is definitely one of the best games one of my favorite games that I've played. And yeah, I do have a memory of first playing it because, again, I'm the youngest of three, so I was always the last to have a go at anything because older siblings rule apparently. So I do remember watching. I think it was my sister that was playing, again, it always comes back to my sister playing games. I remember watching her
you guys
play
have been
it.
playing a lot of games together here lately too, right? That's
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, we kind of have a weird affinity for like unspoken communication when it comes to like cooperation games. So
Yeah.
when we were playing Overcooked the other day, we did play it on stream, we played it off stream as well, but there's just a point where you sort of, you know what the other person is doing without having to voice it. It's really strange.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. You have to do that playing music as well.
Oh. Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I interrupted where you were going with your story about Ocarina.
Yeah, so yeah, I remember watching my sister play it a lot when I was younger. Eventually, I managed to get a go of it, and pretty much what you just said about your experience with it, that it's one of those games that does suck you in. There's just something about it that is just incredible, and I think aside from, because like that was like the era that I was bringing into like 3D games and stuff. It's one of my favorite Zelda games because of that. The Link's Awakening is great and everything, but it's very flat. But the whole story behind Ocarina of Time is another reason why I like it as well.
Yeah, they did the time travel mechanic and things in the past affected things in the future. But I remember the N64 era specifically because it felt like there was an infinite amount of possibilities. Like, it was so fun to go explore an area because you're like, has anyone ever seen this? I carried that over in a lot of games, in MMOs especially, early MMOs. You're like, millions of people have played this MMO, let's say World of Warcraft. Has anyone ever gone this far into this area and found this? What hidden treat did the developer put in here to nod to you for finding all these things? The dungeons were just so massive in Ocarina. The overworld, even though if you look back now, it feels kind of small compared to what you remember. But at the time, there was nothing like it. I mean, nothing.
I also remember that feeling of, oh, this is open world. I can go where I want. I don't have to stay linear or everything. But that was when I was younger. When you go back to play now, it's obvious that there is a set route that you have to take. But that feeling of like, say, when you were young, like, there's so much to explore. I can go anywhere.
Yeah, and I think what they did was they limited like certain progress, but you could run on to, was it Longline Ranch right off the bat?
Oh yeah,
or you could skip it entirely. So, and that was unheard of at the time. I mean, most games, I think this happened after Ocarina. It became more obvious that once you get a hook shot. I know I can go that way. I know when I played Skyward Sword, I would go to an area. I'm like, well, I can't go this way because there's the hook shot thing I recognize from the last 3 games I played. So I think that's why Breath of the Wild was the answer to that stale formula that Ocarina started. And I think it's a testament to how good and ahead of their time Ocarina was. That gameplay model lasted till 2010. 2011, I think, when Skyward Sword came out. So, Dee, do you think you might want to go back and play Ocarina?
Yeah, I'd love to, actually, because I think back then when I watched you, because you've always been good at gaming, I was still at that point where I'd watch you do something and go, no, I could never beat that boss. I'm a lot more confident than I used to be, and I think I could, because I think the reason I liked watching you play is because sometimes I'd help you figure out the puzzles. Like, you'd be in a certain temple, like the water temple just looked like it would infuriate me. But
you'd get a guide for that.
I helped.
There were no guides though. I think we got AOL Online or online internet that the year that came out, maybe right after it came out or right before. I don't remember. And I can remember going back and like when GoldenEye was new, trying to look up secrets for GoldenEye and had speedrun guides. Like on there was a website called Unseen 64 that I think still is around. That was one of the first places you could find stuff. That IGN and those places.
Because I remember with GoldenEye there were loads of cheats that you could put in, like things that you could make the guns into like paintball guns. You could have big heads. how you could have like
Yeah.
one-shot kills, and yeah, I do remember that.
And there was a game that came out after it, Perfect Dark, which was kind of a not really a sequel, but a spiritual sequel. And there were these in all the different maps. There were these like hidden pieces of cheese, and I remember seeing them here, and then I'm like, what do all these do? And it was like it was unfinished content that they did. They were going to have some kind of like, they're going to kind of like cheat that you could enable if you found them all, but they never finished it. But they left all the cheese up there just to mess with everybody. But going back to that Zelda timeline, basically the Ocarina of Time is where the timeline splits. So there's a split that happens in Ocarina of Time that if Link dies in Ocarina of Time, there's a timeline, and if he lives, there's a timeline. So if the hero is defeated, it start the next game in line. And now the way they explain this is that the princess, the hero, and Ganon are all like generations. They even specifically say this in some of the games, later games, that it's not the same Link over and over again. It's like a descendant from him, and he gets the ceremonial garb and becomes Link again. Or whatever you happen to name him. I think that's one of the reasons why you can name your character every time. But the next game, if Link dies in Ocarina of Time, the next game is what happens is there's a thing called the Imprisoning War. And the first game, there's A Link to the Past, which is the SNES one where Zelda, if you've played that one, that's the overhead one where Zelda is locked up in a prison, I think, at the beginning of it, and Link's uncle tells him to go in there. I think his uncle dies on the way trying to rescue her, and gives Link the sword and everything. Have you played that one, D or Cherry?
I have not.
No, played that one.
I've played that one once.
Did you play through the whole thing, or did you just
no?
play it a bit?
I played through the whole thing. I think it was one of the maybe the second or third game that I actually streamed.
Oh, you streamed it? Okay.
Yeah,
I remember you telling me about that. I played that one when it was new on the SNES one summer, or whenever it came out. I don't know if I got it the day it came out, but I definitely within a few months. And I played it in like 48 hours, and I don't remember anything about it.
Wow.
Yeah, I looked forward to it so much, and I played the hell out of it, but I don't remember it. And then, so after Link to the Past, which ends with you defeating Ganon again, then the Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons games, which were Game Boy games, are next in that line. The Resurrection of Ganon, which I've never played either one of those. I think I had one on the Virtual Console for the Wii U, but I never touched it.
I think I played the Oracle of what?
Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons.
I think it was the Oracle of Ages, the ones that I started to play, but I think I got stuck in it and then lost interest. Gotcha.
Yeah, from what I remember and what I've read, it's very similar to Link to the Past. It's a little bit pared down because it's the same gameplay type, though. It's the overhead.
Yeah.
More like Zelda 1, I call it Zelda 3, but A Link to the Past.
With the Oracle of Ages, you have to go back and forth in timeline. So
yeah,
I can see the resemblance to Link to the Past with the Light World and the Dark World. So yeah,
exactly. A funny trivia thing about Link to the Past: it's called Link to the Past because it was supposed to have that time travel mode, and they cut it out before it was released because it wasn't done.
Oh wow!
And that's why some of those things carried over to Oracle of Ages and Seasons. After the Oracle of Ages and Seasons in the timeline of the hero, the fallen hero is defeated timeline is Link's Awakening. So after Link's actually the end of Oracle of Ages or Oracle of Seasons 1, I remember reading this somewhere, Link escapes on a boat, and that's the boat he's on at the beginning of Link's Awakening. So that makes sense that they thought that through. And then after Link's Awakening, the monarchs of Hyrule use the Triforce in the Golden Era, and then there's the tragedy of Princess Zelda 1. The Legend of Zelda, the very first one, the very first game is called the Era of Decline. And so that game is at the end of, it takes place after Ocarina of Time, then Link to the Past happens, then Oracle of Ages season, Link's Awakening, then Zelda 1 happens, and then Zelda 2 happens, because Zelda 2 is a direct sequel to Zelda 1.
Okay, I have a question about this.
Yeah.
So when they first started making these Zelda series, was this timeline in mind, or is this just something that they've created to get around?
I've seen countless speculation videos that piece together evidence from conversations with Zelda. That what they said when the developer said, Eiji Aonuma. Aonuma. Yeah, that's his name. Exactly. We're getting all the good stuff today.
Oh, yeah.
But basically, the consensus on that is, and I believe that no, they didn't have it all in mind as they actually did it. I think they sat down at the release of Skyward Sword and said, hey, let's piece all this puzzle together and see if we can make something out of it. Because there's still a lot of question of whether Breath of the Wild fits in this timeline at all or not.
You told me it was like, wasn't it before everything had happened? You say it was like a prequel.
That's Skyward Sword.
No. I was asking the other day when I was streaming it, when did you say it fell?
I don't think it's been discussed. I'm looking now. They're in an interview with Games Radar. Hideyomaru Fujibayashi shared his opinion, saying, "I would say that we're not really concerned with it with the timeline and fitting Breath of the Wild in there." Then following up with similar thoughts from Eiji Aonuma had this to say: "We published a book with a timeline, but we definitely got comments from users saying, is this really accurate? I think this should be this way. It's different. And history is always kind of imaginative. It's left to the person who writes the book. So that's how we approach it as well. It's not necessarily that we come up with a game and think, oh, this is where it fits in the timeline. And honestly, lately, we're kind of scared to say exactly where things are in the timeline for that reason.
Yeah.
We like to leave things to the imagination. So yeah, I think if I told you that Breath of the Wild was the start of it, I might have been confused and meant Skyward Sword.
I can't actually remember. I think I was just exploring, and I think I said something, and then you were like, "Oh wait, no, this actually happens before." Okay. Something like that, anyway.
So after Ocarina of Time, when the hero is triumphant against Ganondorf, there are two eras that happen after that. There's the child version of what happens, because at the end of Ocarina of Time, Link can either stay as a kid or he can go back to being an adult, or I guess both. He's a kid first, then he's an adult. The child era version has Majora's Mask happens right after Ocarina of Time.
Which is one that I've never played, and I don't think I ever will play.
I would say it's worth playing through if you can get the 3DS version and you have a guide to ease the frustration. But it's definitely one that if you are a person that doesn't like not knowing what to do a lot, it's one that'll drive you crazy. If you've got a ton of time and you can just get lost in the world and experience it, it's fun. But I got annoyed with it more than I enjoyed it. It has some magical moments, don't get me wrong. It's got 4 dungeons and then a final boss area. But because you're stuck in like a Groundhog's Day loop where every 3 days the world resets, there are some things you can only do if you can figure them out in those 3 days. Otherwise, you have to start all over again.
Yeah.
And that can drive you crazy.
You played that one, Dee?
I actually did try to play it because didn't we get that on the 3DS when it came out?
Yeah, we did.
I was like, oh, maybe I'll try it. And I'll tell you, I couldn't do it. And she said, it's amazing. I actually watched Crunk play through it, and it is an amazing game. But yeah, that Groundhog's thing where, oh, you got to get this done by a certain time, or you have to wait till the next day. It drove me nuts.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, here's what I'll say about Majora's Mask. I've got a lot of love and respect for it, even though I have a hard time playing through it again. I got it for the 3DS, and I played probably half of it again with a guide. And I used a guide the first time just to ease that frustration. But it is probably the darkest, closest thing Zelda ever gets to a horror game, because its major theme is of loss and death. And if you play it, every character that you find a mask to be able to envision them are dead characters.
Wow.
One, you get to be the Deku Scrub. Yeah, it's a very dark game. There's a Deku Scrub at the beginning, the little tree people, and his you start to suspect that his dad's looking for him, can't find him, and you find this mask that has the power of the Deku Scrub that turns you into him, and it's just a way to offer up the gameplay mechanics. But you never find the Deku Scrub. Then you find a Zora and a Goron, and every one of those characters, except for the Deku Scrub, is confirmed to have been killed. Then during the credits, it shows the dad of the Deku Scrub crying at his son's grave, and it's very dark.
Oh my word!
Yeah, it's a very, like, I respect what they were able to pull off. You know, you figure how often does a mainline Zelda game come out? Every 4 or 5 years, right? Majora's Mask came out 1 year to almost to the day after Ocarina of Time, and because they were able to reuse some of those assets, they just kind of remixed it. And by introducing that 3-day mechanic, it played a lot different, even though it was very similar in game style. But the fact that it ever got released just blows my mind. But it's an amazing experience, and I'm glad I did it. It's just not one of those, like Dee said earlier, it's one of those games you can't play over and over again.
So you say this one, Majora's Mask, going back to the timeline, is after Ocarina of Time. After Link stays as a child. Right.
Let's say he goes back to being a child after Ocarina of Time, then it's Majora's Mask.
So what is there any reasoning behind like the why people have died? Like, you know, you say that you can you see them or play as them if you discover a mask?
Well, you know, and that's what's very interesting is, yeah, if you've played you haven't played this one, so you don't know.
No.
You get the masks. There's a creepy mask salesman. Now I really want to see you play it because it's got some really neat elements. But there's this creepy mask salesman, and he wants you to help him find some masks. And you find one that has a Deku. It's from a Deku Scrub. When you put it on, Link becomes a Deku Scrub. He has this like body horror transformation into a Deku Scrub. He screams in pain and looks up at the camera when it happens. It's very much a dark game. In fact, I'm surprised that they got away with some of the stuff that they did. You know how Ocarina of Time had like some really scary, spooky dungeons in it? Yeah. Nearly the whole game of Majora's Mask is like that. I mean, there are kids that played this game when they were young who are terrified because the moon has this like creepy face on it. It's up in the sky and it's coming down the whole time you're playing in real time.
That creeps me out.
Exactly. But yeah, you transform into a Deku Scrub who has like certain abilities. There's places on the world where you can jump into a flower and jump up and turn into a helicopter, do some platforming stuff. There's you can turn into a Goron and become a ball and roll around, and then there's dungeons and areas of the game you have to be able to turn into this ball to get past it. And then one area where you become a Zora and you have to swim around, and he can swim like literally like a fish when he's in Zora form. So is the whole, like the entirety of the game, like you finding masks for the salesman? No, that's part of it, but the what I remember most is you have to solve what is happening. The game starts off with Link on a horse. And he runs into this, was it Skull Kid? Is that his name?
Yeah, Skull Kid.
You run into Skull Kid, and he finds Majora's Mask, which is like this. It's got its history in a real life, I want to say, South Indian tribe. And this mask is like pure malevolent and evil. In Japan, masks can have spirits in them. And this Skull Kid gets turned into this like demonic creature who basically goes and does a ritual on top of a tower that brings the moon crashing down into the town. And every time the moon crashes down, Link wakes up at the beginning of the first day. And you basically have to solve why that's happening and stop it from happening and break the curse. But there's a theme overall in the whole game, and it's all this evil stuff. Nice. Yeah, it's very wild, and you fight the. I remember reading an article about it. You fight these. You literally fight the mask at the end. He sprouts legs and arms, and you fight him. It's very creepy. But you fight the monsters, the bosses from the 4 dungeons they've got these really weird and unpronounceable names to English speakers, hard to pronounce anyway. And if I remember right, they are actually deities from from the culture of that South Indian tribe that this whole idea came from. Nintendo's notorious of like latching onto an idea and incorporating it some way into their game, and this is like the most far out, as far as I've seen, far out thing they've ever been able to mix into a mainline game. I mean, you think about Zelda is one of their flagship franchises, and they basically created a game that's a horror game about loss and death and dying over and over again. It's pretty dark.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like even the people in town, it's kind of crazy, Terry. You start talking to the people, and you run into people with depression, or they're in denial.
Really?
And a lot of them have problems. So you try to solve for them, and it's crazy.
Part of what ropes people into the game, it's I think it suffers from its age. If it were to get like a full-on remake by a talented team who cared about doing it right, it could probably be really good again. But it's a lot of reading, it's a lot of bad graphics. But basically, when you go into the main town and start talking to people, they're like, yeah, the moon's kind of big, but we're not really worried. And then that's the second day. Some people are like, I'm getting kind of concerned. And other people are like, no, it's nothing. And then like the third day, people are like shitting themselves. They're like, we're all going to die. We need to repent. We need to go make peace with it. And I'm oversimplifying it. There is some really good story in there. Somebody you need to talk to about it sometime while he's streaming or next time he's in your chat is B-Shiv.
Yeah.
Because he absolutely loves the game. He's a bit younger than me, so he probably played it at just that right time when you have all the time in the world to do whatever. I was probably 22 when it came out and working full time. I couldn't really get into it as much as I'd like. But it's a great game. It's just modern games have spoiled us to the point to where it's hard for us to get immersed into something that holds us back or frustrates us to this point. You know what I mean?
I feel like it kind of got maybe a bit overshadowed by the Ocarina of Time.
Oh, it definitely did. It came out like a year later, and it sold really well. Not as well as Ocarina, but it sold well.
Mm.
Then after that, on the child era, is the demon thief Ganondorf is executed at the end of Majora's Mask. I don't know if that's
just before you go any further. Is Ganon actually in Majora's Mask?
No, he's not.
Right.
There's hardly anybody, with the exception of Link. There's nobody. There's some people who look similar because they reused assets.
Yeah. But
they all have different names from Ocarina. It's a completely different story.
Mm.
In fact, there was a popular theory until this timeline came out. There was a popular theory that Majora's Mask was what happened to Link in Purgatory after he died at the end of Ocarina of Time. But this contradicts that.
Oh.
But after that, after Majora's Mask, there's Twilight Princess. Which, have you played that one?
I tried playing that one, but I just couldn't get into it. I really couldn't. Yeah. I wasn't a big fan of the whole changing into a wolf mechanic.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, it just put me off. I didn't want to play that.
I understand. I think, Dee, you didn't play that one either. You just watched me, if I remember.
I watched you because I was pregnant with Molly at the time. Yeah. You were trying to finish it actually before we had her.
I'm like, I gotta get this game out while I have time.
You've got a timeline for it.
Yeah, it's exactly what happened. I was playing it like I'd come home from work and I'd play it as quick as I could, try to get it out. But it's a really long game. It's a really good game too. I was super impressed with it. After Twilight Princess, which is a great game, I'm not going to get real into it. It's an amazing story. It's most like Ocarina to me than any of the other games. It introduces a little bit of the annoying, nag screens. The wolf stuff didn't bother me after I got used to it. And it has a really unique art style with the glowy, was it orange and blues that light up in their version of the Minus world.
Mm.
I really enjoyed that one. I did kind of rush through it though, because as Dee said, we were about to bring home a bundle of joy. But it was a lot of fun. And then after that, they say that after Twilight Princess, Four Swords Adventures, which I've never played, the resurrection of Ganondorf and Vati for that game, but I've never played those. I think that was on the Game Boy Advance, the one where you could plug 4 Game Boy Advances into a GameCube.
Oh, yeah.
Or as I call it, the Millionaires game. How the hell do you play that? It was an online multiplayer game, except for the online part. Everyone had to bring their own everyone had to have a console and bring it and plug it into a fourth console and play it on a TV. It's like, what is the point? Nintendo, what do you say? And the other leg of the timeline after Ocarina of Time, where the hero is triumphant, is the Wind Waker. Basically, if you've played Wind Waker, the Ganondorf floods the area, right? So Ganondorf is resurrected, floods the area, and you go back down to the Temple of Time under the water in Wind Waker. I didn't play on GameCube Wind Waker all the way through. I was literally working 80-hour work weeks during that time, if I remember right. And it came out 2002-ish, 3-ish. and I tried to play it, but every time I turned it on, I'd fall asleep. It was just too. I wasn't real put off by the animation style, but the performance of the GameCube was really started to bother me there.
That was one of the main things that I remember from that game is the different art style, the cell shaded that they went for. In that, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was very different for Zelda and what they'd done in the past.
And like a couple of years ago on the Wii U, they released an HD version of it, and I enjoyed it. It was 60 frames. I had a little bit more time to kind of sink my teeth into it, and they did a lot of really good stuff when it comes to like streamlining the game. They gave you the fast sale a little earlier, and they took out some of the gated content where you had to do some fetch quest stuff. That some of that was gone, and I really enjoyed it. I was able to have like a concise experience. I didn't completion it. I didn't go 100% completion on it. I just went through the main story and got to the end. It does have one of the most awesome ending battle scenes ever. You're fighting with Zelda against Ganon, and she kicks the sword. I don't know exactly how it happens, but she kicks the sword over to you, and Link jumps up, grabs the sword, and stabs him right between the eyes.
Oh.
And it freezes with the sword sticking out of his head, and that's how he dies.
I'm just going to look that up right quick.
So, I mean, even though it's kind of I remember being enamored with trying to get Molly to play it. You know, as a parent, I'm like, I want to get my kid to play the game series that I love. I think it's stuff we could bond over, you know. And she has nothing to do with Zelda. Never wants to touch it. Now we couldn't get her to play Breath of the Wild or even. But I was like, this is a cartoon version of Zelda. It's her first one. It'll be amazing. Did you see it? Did you look up the picture?
I'm doing it now.
Oh, okay. But no, she has no desire to play it.
Did you play that one, Dee?
I tried playing that. I actually played what was the D? It was
So after
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. It's right. It's the perfect time. Right after Wind Waker, Phantom Hourglass takes over.
I played more of that, actually. What was funny is I got really into that. I never actually finished it because I got frustrated with you. You always ended up having to go into a certain dungeon where I think it had something to do with time. It's been a long time, but I played more of that than I did Wind Waker.
But didn't you have to go back there like multiple times during the game and basically do the same dungeon over again?
Yes, and that's what I got burned out on.
Yeah. I mean, basically what I remember reading about, they basically got, when they split into the handheld division and the mainline console division, and they're in between consoles all the time, they were trying to put out too many Zelda games, and content would just get cut, and they'd reuse stuff, and it really started to show itself, I think, in that era when Wind Waker wasn't commercially as successful as a Zelda game needed to be to save the GameCube. They started making the Wii after the GameCube, and Phantom Hourglass and those things kind of got rush jobs. Including the one that comes after this, Spirit Tracks. Did you play that one too, Dee?
No, I did not play that one.
Yeah, that one was basically the train simulator one, right?
Oh, yeah. People hate that one, don't they?
Yeah, but in the storyline, those characters, you know, Impa, or not Impa, what was in Wind Waker, what was Zelda's name when she was a pirate? What was her name? I don't remember.
Oh, I wish I could remember.
But she's in Phantom Hourglass again, and then she's also your companion in Spirit Tracks. You looking it up?
Yeah, sorry, you can hear me. Tetra,
that's her name, yeah. So yeah, Zelda has a history of dressing up as other characters and pretending to be somebody else.
Oh, I didn't know that was Zelda. Spoiler.
Oh, you didn't know Tetra? Spoiler alert, everybody.
No.
Sorry.
Sorry, Dee.
So we've gone through the whole timeline. What do you guys think, given that timeline that we just went through? Where do you think Breath of the Wild takes place?
I think it's difficult to say yet because me and Dee haven't finished the game yet.
Yeah.
So, Dee.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a little hard because I feel like it's almost way after, because they're getting ready for Ganon to come back again. They've already had the story of the hero, and you know, the I guess Zelda being heroine, saving them
Yeah.
before, and they're getting ready for it to happen again. So it's almost, I don't know. As Cherry said, it's hard to tell exactly where, but I feel like it's a lot later.
And
I almost feel like it's. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Cherry.
I was going to say, I'm kind of in agreement with Dee now that she said that, because this is like when you play as Link, you're 100 years later after he's been put to sleep. So there is that to consider as well, that massive chunk of time.
I almost feel like it's almost like a retelling of Zelda 1. Or like Zelda 1, like if it has that the hero failed vibe. Like when I look at the timeline, there's Ocarina splits into the hero failed and the hero was triumphant. Being the fact that Link didn't win and Zelda had to freeze him for 100 years so he could gain his power. It almost feels like it's somewhere between Ocarina and the creation of Land and Sky, basically the Skyward Sword. Like, it's after Ganon's become Ganon, but he's still like this big, powerful monstrosity thing. So, I think we've already answered it with reading the comments by Mr. Aonuma, who's the lead designer. I don't think they worry themselves too much about it. They kind of fit in there later if they can, but it's still kind of an interesting thing to think about, especially when you played, I think between all of us, the only one none of us have played is Spirit Tracks.
Yeah.
Maybe Four Swords Adventures, those two. But we've all touched on the games somewhere along the line, along the series. I think it's pretty iconic in video games as a whole, the game series, and I think they're changed to a more open world style and changing the way that they made the gameplay in Breath of the Wild was probably one game later overdue than what it could have been. But there's not a whole lot of games like it. I mean, can you guys think of a game like Zelda that's kind of captures everything that it does? There are games that like clone it, and even the clones don't really do it justice, do they?
But there's that, and this is such a long-running series as well. You'd be hard pressed to find anyone that's a gamer, maybe even not a gamer, that hasn't heard of The Legend of Zelda.
It's true.
Yeah, I was about to say that's very true.
So what's the after having this discussion, is there a Zelda game that you'd like to play on stream?
Ooh, I vote D play was it Majora's? No,
Ocarina.
Yeah, Ocarina of Time. Yeah. I vote D
I'd
play
like
that.
to. I'd like to.
All right. What about you, Cherry?
I don't know. I don't know.
Just admit you want to play Spirit Tracks.
Train Simulator 2018. Yeah. Well, I was just looking at the ending of the Wind Waker now that you told me about what happened to Ganon.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of maybe interested in going back to actually play it again.
Well, that stinks you don't have a Wii U anymore.
Well, yeah.
Because the HD version's on the Wii U.
Oh, is it?
It's definitely worth playing. Yeah, the HD remaster, not only does it look better, performs better, it actually has a lot of quality of life improvements.
Ah, dang.
Damn it. You should play Zelda 2. You'd love it.
No.
Adventure of Link. It's a great game.
40 subs, and then you get that.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, you got to play Dark Souls first. It'll be breeze after Dark Souls.
Well, I was talking to Dee earlier. Oh, was it yesterday,
Yeah.
Dee? Oh, it was yesterday.
Yeah.
I've kind of got the mindset now that I don't really care. So, like, I'll go play it. I'm not going to let it get to me. Oh,
Beat your head against that wall and just smile about it.
Yeah, not go cry in a corner, rocking back and forth.
I was going, it's just a game. I got upset too when I played Dark Souls, and then I'm like, wait a minute, it's just a stupid game.
yeah. I know.
I'm sitting here looking at the list of a game I might want to try to stream, a Zelda game I might want to stream, and I think what I'm going to do is just do Breath of the Wild on the challenge mode, because I might like to play Zelda 2 Adventures of Link again on stream just so people can appreciate it more. But
Crunk, you know what you need to do first?
What's that?
Actually finish Breath of the Wild.
Yeah. I'll do that when I play the Heart Challenge. I'll beat it on challenge mode.
Yeah, I think that would be neat, because, I mean, wasn't that one of the reasons that you wanted to start streaming too?
Yes, it is. It's the game that I started streaming with. I cheated and played Zelda 2 just kind of, I wanted to do some tests to make sure that I worked out any bugs for a couple of days. I streamed before that, but I started with the Switch. I streamed probably like 8 hours that first night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But what's your favorite Zelda game, D?
Oh,
Of all time.
Of all time?
Even if you haven't played it, just the one that you liked the best.
I would say Ocarina of Time. I just, the fond memories and the story itself, and just never seeing something quite like that.
And who's your favorite non-Zelda, Link, or Ganon character? Do you have a favorite boss or a favorite reoccurring character? Even if it's a one-off, is there a character that you just are super glad they put it in the game?
Oh.
Yeah.
You need to think about that one.
There's so many.
Yeah. I don't.
But you got to pick your favorite. There's got to be one that you love more than the rest of them. It's Tingle, isn't it?
No. I don't. What about like? I love the Gorons. Can we say like a race?
I mean, yeah, you can say a whole race, I suppose. You like the Gorons the best?
Yeah, I don't know.
What
There's
about-
just something about them.
What about the giant Goron who makes the big Goron sword? Is he your favorite?
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Or Darunia from Ocarina of Time? The
one that dances.
The one that dances? Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Chief, yeah.
I like Beetle.
I was going to say Beetle as well.
Thank you.
Is that who you were going to say, Sherry?
No, Beetle's cool,
Oh.
but
Who's your favorite? What's your favorite game? And who's your favorite character?
I think the Ocarina of Time is definitely my favourite one. It's a toss-up between that and Link's Awakening, but I think gameplay-wise and looks-wise, I think Ocarina of Time tips it. Link's Awakening is just there because it's just so nostalgic. It's the first one I ever played. Character-wise, I don't know. I kind of want to just say Epona.
Epona?
Yeah.
That's fair.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
She's just such a beautiful horse.
She's so pretty.
Pretty. She's pretty.
My favorite game is going to be a real shocker, is Ocarina of Time. For reasons I've already gushed about already. But my favorite character, I'd have to say, is Midna, the actual Twilight Princess from Twilight Princess, because she was the first character to have like a personality. You know, they all had personalities, but she had less of a generic one, and she was more of the cantankerous, what do you call it? Brooding drama queen. I just loved her character. She didn't take any guff, and she ended up being the Twilight Princess. If you haven't played that one, it's a very interesting story, and she's very powerful in the game. When you played as Link, Wolf Link, she's the little character on Wolf Link's back on the amiibo, and she had that power where that orange hand would come out of her helmet and grab stuff and knock around. I really enjoyed that a lot more, and I enjoyed her as a character. I was thinking back, everything is very much generic when it comes to even Ocarina of Time. The everything was traditional, hero's journey stuff. It was all we must defeat the evil. There wasn't a whole lot of personality there, other than characters like Beetle and some of them, I guess, that they did. But she was the first mainline character I can remember to have a personality that was fun and felt like somewhat of a developed character.
Yeah, she was definitely memorable. Yeah, she had that sarcasm to her.
Yeah,
that would just make you laugh.
Even though it was all Nintendo mumble speak the whole time. The text would scroll and she'd go. Blah, 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 blah. I hate that in games, but they still do it today. It's like, God. I remember at the time when I played Ocarina of Time, going, man, if this game had voice acting, it'd be the best game ever. And I thought with Breath of the Wild that it was going to be that. And there's 50 lines of dialogue in Breath of the Wild. Everything else is still text.
And I actually did like the Skull Kid too.
Yeah, he ended up being a sympathetic character, even though he was kind of evil at the beginning.
Yeah.
He was more like an imp in that game. He was mischievous, and you remember he was his friends had left him, and that's why his friends had ran off and to play without him, and he started crying, and that's how he was weak enough for the mask to imprison him and take that hurt and lash out against the world. That's how, if I remember right, I know I've just talked myself into loving and wanting to play Majora's Mask again, but that game is very, other than the groundhog mechanic that kind of gets on my nerves, it's got a very unique world and story to tell compared to everything else on here. It's probably, you're right, Dee. He's probably was the first developed character, Skull Kid.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've about covered it up here, guys. If anything else you want to say about Zelda before we wrap it up?
No, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I was about to say somebody should definitely, if they haven't tried Zelda series, talking to you, Snuffus, if you're listening to this, you should definitely try.
Wait. Snuffus has not played any Zelda game?
No, he has not.
He's 100% at every single game.
Depending on who you talk to. Well, we need to get him a suggested order. That's what we'll work on after this. So, Dee, where can people reach you?
They can reach me. I am on Twitter at the Sunny D. I'm also on Twitch, of course, twitch.tv / the Sunny D.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here. Cherry, how about you?
Yes, I am also on Twitter. I am at cherrycake518. And also on Twitch, which is Cherrycake TV.
All right. And my name is Crunky. I'm also on twitch.tv / Crunky with 2 N's and Crunky_Twitch on Twitter. Yeah, that's a tongue twister. If you're listening this far into the podcast, I want to give a couple of shout outs. First off, get a hold of Cherry if you need any kind of video editing or design work for your channel. She does a lot of that work on the side. She's done lots of work for me and other way bigger streamers than me. So you can reach out to her on, is it Twitter is the best way to get a hold of you?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And also help the podcast out. If you guys are listening to this for the first time or for the 100th time, do me a favor and tell 2 of your friends to check it out. They don't even have to listen. Just have them download it and tell them to give it 5 minutes. Maybe recommend an episode for them. But we're trying to grow the podcast again. We are going to I'm about to put some money into marketing for it, but before I do, I have to get to a certain number of downloads. So if my math is right, if everyone who listens to this episode last month tells 2 people, I can probably do that next month. So if you guys could do that, I'd appreciate it. But until next time, go lurk yourself. Was that too cheesy?
No.
Yes, it's very cheesy. No, kidding.